This is the flywheel cover off of the 704 cleanup project, and as you can see, the bottom's pretty well rusted out. That, in combination with the back plate being broken so there's less mounting bolts, allows the pull starter to move around while you're starting it. So I'm going to try to fix at least half of the issue. I don't have any extra covers with the mounting holes for the pull starter, but I do have some covers off of the belt start model. This one's a good candidate to cut up. It's got some surface rust, but the metal's still solid. So I'm going to cut them up and try to make one good one. This one has a bolt hole here that I don't want, but I do want to take this section that would replace this slot that's broken out. I need to have a starting point that's the same on both of these housings. So I'm going to start by marking a line that's a 1/2 inch below that mounting hole. And I'm going to mark a line that's a 1/2 inch above the mounting hole. Now I need to mark a line somewhere between the two holes. So I'm going to slide my ruler up so the 3-inch mark is in line with the face of this head. That way I'm measuring a dimension from the edge. And it looks like I want to pick 1.5 inches. So I'm going to mark a line there. For the other end of this piece, I just want to make sure I take out all the bad spots. So I'm going to put it 2 inches below the bottom of this slotted hole. Now I'm going to extend those lines towards the center of the starter hole, and I'm going to take out as much of the bad stuff as I can. Since I'm going to cut with the big cutoff wheel, the cut needs to be on that flat section between the two curves. I'm going to freehand this part, and when I cut it, I'll just make sure I leave extra metal. I got this clamped down to the table, and since this is the part that I want to save, I'm going to cut on the outside of the lines. Now on this one, I'm going to cut out the part that I don't want to save. So I'm going to cut on the inside of the lines. You can't tell by this shot, but I'm laying on the floor looking up so I can see the line. Before I throw this piece in the spare sheet metal pile, I'm going to take off this serial tag and save it. If you support the piece on the edge of the table and push down a little bit with something hard, you can open up enough gap to get a small screwdriver behind it and take them out without hurting them. Here's how the two pieces fit together, and as you would expect, the most interference is along this top section, because I didn't really measure that. You can see that this surface doesn't line up yet. It's touching up here in this curved area, and it's the same thing on the other end. So I'm going to clean up that curved area and take away metal till those pieces line up. On this part, I don't want to take much more metal away, so I'm just going to straighten up the edge. That's getting a lot closer. This edge is still a little bit higher, but now it's touching on this notched out section. Before I cut these pieces apart, I put one on the table here and traced a line around it. That way I could set the two parts up here and make sure I wasn't too far out of control. You can see this gap gets bigger near the center of the patch panel, so I need to take material off each end of the patch to make those two curves match up. First I'm going to focus on this complicated end and get those to fit better. Then if I need to take away more material, I'll take it off the straight end. This old wooden table's not quite flat, and you really want that back edge to be straight. So I'm going to double check it on this thicker piece of plywood. Well, I decided I want to take more material off of this end of the patch, and I just need to try to keep it square. Well, I got these pieces sandblasted. I'm going to try to stick them together. So what I plan on doing is welding this one end together, and then weld the other end together, and I'll connect the curved part last. This one end is all welded up, and I ground off most of the weld. You can see how this is flared out here, and it don't want to go back into place, and that's because I messed up here and I welded too far up the curve. So I need to cut a slot in there, and that'll give it room to move back into position. Well, it'll move into position now, but it seems to be kind of twisted. So I'm going to hammer on the welds and see if that helps it. Well, that makes quite a difference. It's not all puckered up anymore. It's got a nice curve to it. Well, I can't get that top corner to go where I want it to go. Looks like it's touching here at the top. So I think I'll clamp it at the top and work my way up. These two parts don't line up where this radius is here. Well, that's good for that little section. One of the trickiest parts to putting two thin pieces together like this is getting close to the edge without burning it away. So I start where I've already got some weld, because that section is thick enough to absorb the heat better. And then I work my way up. I need to go from both sides just to make sure there's enough metal to absorb the heat. And then you slowly build your way up to the edge. There's plenty of excess metal that needs to be ground away. But with a MIG welder like this, it makes too much heat for that thin metal. So you need that glob of metal there to absorb the heat. I'm going to keep working my way towards the center. Just line up one section at a time and only weld the part that you have lined up. I got some spots over here I need to fix before I go farther. That radius on the inside edge of the patch panel curves up a little too quickly. I fixed that on each end of the patch panel before I welded them, but now I need to bend that edge inward all the way across there. So I'm going to use this round piece of metal for an anvil so I can support it on the inside of that curve. I have those two surfaces lined up pretty well, but there's still a big gap in there. The metal's pretty thin on that one side because of the rust, and I probably won't be able to keep it from melting away. So I'm going to use a little different strategy here. I'm pretty sure there's enough room in there to use some little patch panels on the inside. So I'm going to use these little strips of metal. The little strip of metal is curved more than the starter housing, so if I clamp it on each end, it'll be touching in the middle. So I'm going to weld it in the middle, take off the clamps, and hammer down each end. I'm going to use that same strategy all the way across there, except for the two areas where it's rusted really thin. Each of those two areas get their own custom-made patch. This is what the first one looks like. It's difficult to hammer that into the same shape as the starter housing, so I'm going to tack it in place and then hammer it against the starter housing. That gets the patch panel close enough to the original metal so the thin areas don't melt away. I tacked it in place at the top two corners there, so the rest of it will be free to move around while I peen it into shape. That's what you want there. It works best if the patch panel is right up against that metal that's rusted thin. This is what the second patch looks like. Here you can see the hammer marks from where I peened it into shape. This one's big enough that it flares up a little bit on this edge, so I'm going to clamp it down. You need to make sure your patch extends well past the holes. If there's not enough patch behind it to absorb the heat, the thin stuff will just melt away. When I think I'm done welding, I like to clean it up on the wire brush. That makes it easier to see any low spots or pinholes that you need to go back and fix. This is a roll-off disc. It's basically sandpaper. So this is just a rotary sander. I like to use a hand file when I'm getting close to the end, because that smooths out the high spots, or at least shows me where they are. After that, I use some sandpaper. Well, this is what it looks like after the paint. It's just primer on there, and that's the way I'm going to leave it for now. Just need something on there to keep it from rusting. Now remember, this is a mechanical repair, not a restoration. This is what it looks like on the tractor. Seems to fit up pretty good. I also made a steel bushing for here. This used to be a brass bushing, and the rope had cut all the way through the side of it. I made sure that's all smooth in there so it don't wear out the rope. Well, that sounds a lot better. It used to skip a tooth every time you pulled it because of the flexing going on. There's still some flexing going on because one of the bolts is missing. The casting is broke off behind it, so there's nowhere to screw it in. Well, I'm not going to start it because it's pretty cold at the moment. I'm going to wait for a better day. Alright, that's it.